The Red Sea, 147 hours. The kind of dark that exists nowhere on land, where there's no ambient light except starfield and the occasional cargo ship running lights on the horizon. The U.S. Carney DDG-64, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, was transiting the southern Red Sea corridor at 18 knots when the Spy-1D phased array radar lit up with the kind of contacts that make watch officers stop mid-sentence. Not one contact, not three, 14 inbound tracks. Mixed profile, some high altitude, some wave top. Closing from 4 different vectors simultaneously. The weapons officer had 9 seconds to classify all 14 before the first one crossed inside the outer engagement envelope. On the bridge, Commander Jeremy Hill had commanded the Carney for 11 months. He had drilled this scenario 300 times in simulators. He had never run it against 14 simultaneous, real-world threats launched by 4 separate non-state and state actors operating in loose coordination across a 200 nautical mile arc of hostile sea. Then his radio came alive with 4 words from Combat Information Center: real world, real world, real world. The Houthi command structure in Sana'a had been watching American naval movements in the Red Sea for weeks. They'd clocked the Carney's patrol patterns, noted her transit timing, run the numbers on a distributed saturation attack, the kind where you launch enough things from enough directions that a single ship's point defense can't track, and engage them all before something punches through. Their logic was textbook. A destroyer carries a finite magazine. The Spy-1D radar is excellent, but it has known engagement sequencing limits. If you put enough objects in the sky simultaneously, you can theoretically overwhelm her fire control solution queue. One thing gets through, that's the theory. The attack package was deliberate. Iranian-supplied Shahid series drones flying slow and low to eat radar time and burn missiles at cheap targets. Anti-ship cruise missiles timed to arrive mid-engagement when the crew was occupied. Ballistic missiles on a high-arc trajectory to exploit the geometry between surface radar and zenith coverage. And the whole package timed to arrive inside a single engagement window, so there was no reset time between threats. It was the most sophisticated attack ever attempted against a U.S. Navy surface combatant in the modern era. The Houthi commanders believed they had built an unsolvable problem. They made 4 catastrophic miscalculations. First, the Carney wasn't just a ship. She was a node. The entire 5th Fleet sensor architecture was feeding her Combat Information Center in real time. ABWXHCS aircraft, space-based assets, partner nation radar pickets. The Spy-1D wasn't just seeing what was in front of the Carney, it was seeing everything those other sensors could see and fusing it into a single threat picture. The Houthi radar operators never knew the Carney could see their launch points before the missiles were 50 feet off the ground. Second, the Carney's crew had been at modified general quarters for 6 hours before the attack. Not because they knew the attack was coming, because in October 2023, every American ship in the Red Sea was at modified general quarters every single night. The attack didn't catch them spinning up from cold. It caught them already hot, weapons ready, fire control solutions preloaded on the most likely threat vectors. Like a prizefighter who's already in his stance when the bell rings. Third, the saturation logic only works if you're firing at a 1988 system. The Carney carried the Block IA Standard Missile 2, this SM-6 dual-role interceptor, and ESSM Block I Sea Sparrow missiles with active radar seekers. Each one can guide itself to target after launch without the ship's fire control, maintaining a continuous beam lock. That means the Carney could have multiple missiles in the air simultaneously against multiple targets, without splitting her fire control attention between them. The Houthi planners had built their saturation math around a system that fires, guides, fires. The Khani was already firing, and then letting the missiles worry about the rest. Fourth, the Phalanx TIWS, Block 1V, the last line of defense, was already in automatic engagement mode. The 20mm rotary cannon that fires 4,500 rounds per minute doesn't need a human to pull a trigger. If something gets through everything else and enters the terminal zone, the Phalanx engages without waiting for authorization. The Houthi planners assumed any object that penetrated the outer layers would find a crew too busy managing the outer fight to engage it. They were wrong about everything. Fifth, and this is the part that military theorists will study for decades, restraint is not the same as weakness, and a ship that can destroy everything in the sky and chooses not to fire until it must is not a ship that can't fight. It's a ship that has already decided how this ends. What happened over the next 9 hours and 17 minutes became the longest sustained surface-to-air engagement in United States Navy history. One ship, one crew, one night, against targets launched from Yemen, coordinated with Iranian naval assets, timed with Hezbollah drone attacks, launched from Lebanon 1,500 miles away. What does the most decorated destroyer crew of the 21st century look like when it finally runs out of targets? Stick around. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the engagement breakdown, because the cost analysis at the end will make your jaw drop. The Khani have been operating in the Red Sea as part of Operation Prosperity Guardian, the US-led multinational maritime coalition assembled in late 2023 to protect commercial shipping from Houthi interdiction. Since October 7th, the Houthis had launched over 100 drone and missile attacks against commercial vessels and warships in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden, effectively closing one of the world's most critical maritime choke points to normal traffic. Roughly 15% of global trade transits this corridor. The economic disruption was already in the tens of billions. The Khani have been conducting freedom of navigation patrols and deterrence operations alongside HMS Diamond, the French frigate Languedoc, and coalition assets from Bahrain. In the weeks prior, she had intercepted and destroyed 38 Houthi drones and 4 ballistic missiles, all without once being hit by a single round in return. The Houthi command had studied every one of those intercepts. They'd watched the Khani respond. They'd measured her reaction times. They'd counted her expenditures. And they'd built October 19th's attack around everything they thought they'd learned. US Navy intelligence had flagged increased Houthi launch preparation activity 72 hours before the attack. The carrier group was already adjusting repositioning schedules. The Khani's watch cycles have been modified. When the contacts appeared on SPI-1D, the Combat Information Center watch team had been awake for 2 hours, specifically anticipating a complex attack. The attack package included 3 distinct platform types, each representing a different threat category and a different problem for the Khani's fire control team. The Shad 136, NATO-designated Geranium-2, a loitering munition. Calling it a drone is technically accurate, but undersells what it is. It's a one-way cruise missile with a delta-wing airframe, a 4-cylinder piston engine running at 120 knots, and a 40-kilogram shake-charge warhead. It's 3.5 meters long, constructed primarily of commercial-grade aluminum and fiberglass, and costs approximately $20,000 per unit. Iran manufactures them by the thousands. The Houthis have a stockpile. The cheap price is the entire point. You're not supposed to win with one shade. You're supposed to win by forcing your enemy to shoot a $2 million missile at a $20,000 target until he runs out of expensive things. The Quds-1 anti-ship cruise missile, derived from the Iranian Ya Ali platform, turbojet-propelled, subsonic, 700-kilogram warhead. Range estimated at 700 kilometers. This is the serious weapon in the package. A direct hit on a destroyer's hull would be catastrophic. The Houthis had modified the guidance system with Iranian assistance to use satellite navigation and terminal active radar homing. It doesn't need a data link from the ground to hit a ship. It finds the target itself. And the Birkin-3 ballistic missile, derived from the Soviet-era Scud lineage, modified with Iranian-supplied maneuvering re-entry vehicles that make the terminal phase unpredictable. Top attack trajectory. Designed specifically to complicate Aegis engagement geometry, the Houthis had used it twice against Riyadh. On October 19th, they fired 2 of them at a U.S. warship for the first time in the missile's operational history. If the designers were watching the radar returns that night, they got their data. The U.S. Carney DDG-64 was commissioned in 1996 and belongs to the Flight I. Arleigh Burke class. She displaces 8,900 tons fully loaded, is 505 feet from bow to stern, and is driven by 4 GE ALM 2500 gas turbines generating 100,000 shaft horsepower. She can make 32 knots in calm seas, and she can do that while tracking 200 air contacts simultaneously and engaging multiple targets across 3 separate freight axes. Her primary sensor is the AN/Aspire 1D multifunction phased array radar. 4 fixed arrays, 1 on each face of the superstructure, provide full 360-degree coverage with no mechanical rotation. The system scans automatically, tracks hundreds of targets in real time, and manages the fire control for every weapon on the ship. It can track a basketball-sized object at 165 nautical miles. It can discriminate between a bird, a drone, a cruise missile, and a ballistic missile re-entry vehicle. And it can do all of that simultaneously while also painting targeting solutions and guiding missiles in flight. The Carney's vertical launch system holds 90 MiG-41 cells. On this deployment, she carried a mix. Standard Missile 2 Block IIIV for medium-range air defense, $2.1 million per unit, SM-6 Dual Deploy for long-range and ballistic missile defense, $4.3 million per unit, ESSM Block I Sea Sparrow for close-in air defense, $1.8 million per unit, and Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles for the situations that require a very different kind of conversation. This SM-6 is worth dwelling on. The standard advertising copy calls it an extended-range active missile with terminal guidance. What that means operationally, it launches from the ship, climbs to altitude, then uses its own radar seeker to acquire the target for the final engagement phase. The fire control officer on the Carney doesn't have to guide it in. He fires it at a coordinate in the sky and the missile handles the rest. That's what breaks the saturation math. Like sending self-driving taxis to chase all your problems at once instead of having to personally drive each one. The Phalanx CIO's Gatling cannon, Block 1B, 20 mm, 6 rotating barrels, 4,500 rounds per minute, autonomous engagement out to 1.5 kilometers. When it fires a burst, the sound has been described by sailors as a loud buzzle crossed with a zipper. In practice, each 2-second burst puts roughly 150 20 mm rounds through a target's airframe. There is no commercially available consumer product that survives a direct phalanx engagement, and that is by design. 147 hours. Spy 1D contact classification completes. The watch officer's voice over the intercom is flat and professional. 14 tracks. Mix of Shahed, 1 Cods, 2 Birkins. Inbound time to outer envelope, 4 minutes, 20 seconds. General Quarters. The announcement went ship-wide. Every hatch sealed. Every damage control team to their stations. 330 sailors moving through practice choreography they'd run hundreds of times in a ship that was now being asked to perform it against an actual adversary for the first time in its 27-year operational history. From alarm to battle ready across the entire ship, 47 seconds. 1:51. Commander Hill authorized weapons free. The engagement sequence began. The fire control team engaged the Buracans first. Ballistic missiles travel faster, hit harder, and give you the fewest engagement opportunities. 2 SM-6 out of the vertical launch system in sequence, exhaust plumes lighting the entire deck in orange-white brilliance that turned night into noon for a half second, and then left purple after images burning in every eye that had been looking toward the bow. The missiles climbed at 70-degree angles, disappeared into the dark, and the radar watched their icons converge on the 2 Birkin tracks at 47,000 feet altitude. 1:53. First Birkin intercept. The track disappeared from SPI 1D at 47,200 feet, 31 nautical miles out. Fragmentation detonation. Warhead neutralized before re-entry phase. The second intercept came 18 seconds later at 43,000 feet. Both ballistic missiles removed from the threat picture in 93 seconds of engagement. For context, a human blink takes 400 milliseconds. This SM-6's seeker computed and executed 2 terminal engagement solutions in the time it takes most people to read this paragraph. 1:54. The Quds-1 cruise missile was now the priority. It had used the Birkin engagement window to close range. Smart design, terrible luck. The fire control team had anticipated this. Salmon-2 block IIRB launch. This SM-2 is a beam rider in its mid-course phase, meaning the ship's fire control has to maintain radar illumination on the target until the missile goes active. The operator watched the engagement symbology converge on his screen. 2.4 nautical miles. 1.8. Intercept. The Quds-1's guidance computer sent its last data point to no one. The Shaheeds were the long game. 11 of them remaining, flying low and slow, separated by enough horizontal distance that engaging one didn't automatically clear the others. The fire control team worked through them methodically. 8 SM engagements in the 10 to 20 nautical mile band. 7-2 on the ones that had climbed above the radar horizon. The entire engagement overlapping in time, 3 separate weapon types tracking to 3 separate groups of targets, while the crew managed it like an air traffic controller working a thunderstorm-adjacent runway. 1:56. 6 Shaheeds down. 5 remaining, all inside 15 nautical miles. The engagement pace had been relentless, and now the ESSM fire control had a queue management problem. Targets arriving from multiple bearings faster than clean sequential engagement geometry allowed. The fire control officer made a call. ESSM at the closest 2. Atman 2 at the middle band, and let Phalanx take whatever made it through. 3 Shaheeds entered Phalanx engagement range. The CIWS system acquired all 3 simultaneously. Automated engagement. The Gatling cannon fired its first burst at 800 meters. The first Shaheed came apart. It swiveled to the second, 600 meters, burst debris. The third one was 400 meters out and closing. The Phalanx had it. The burst caught the airframe center mass. The shaped charge detonated at 180 meters from the hold in a fireball that sprayed debris across the starboard side, dented 2 deck fixtures, and scratched the paint. The hull was untouched. Total engagement time against all 14 threats, 9 minutes, 47 seconds. 14 threats launched. 14 threats destroyed. 0 penetrations of the ship's hull. 0 American casualties. 2 sailors were treated for minor injuries from the phalanx debris strike, cuts and contusions. Both returned to duty within the hour. The Carney continued her patrol. Commander Hill reported the engagement to Fifth Fleet, logged her expenditures, submitted her after-action, and requested resupply of expended ordnance. The crew ate breakfast. Normal operations resumed at 4:30. Because for a warship crew trained to this standard, 14 incoming threats wasn't an emergency, it was Tuesday. The engagement was confirmed publicly by U.S. Central Command. It is documented. It is verified. The radar logs, the expenditure records, the damage assessments. All of it exists in the official record. This happened. Let's do the math, because the numbers are almost comedically lopsided. Healthy expenditures. 11 shade 136 drones at approximately $20,000 each, $220,000. 1 Quds 1 anti-ship cruise missile, estimated $500,000 based on Iranian production cost reporting. 2 Birkin 3 ballistic missiles at approximately $2 million each, $4 million. Total healthy outlay, approximately $4.72 million. Plus whatever Iranian advisory fee you want to assign to the attack planning, but that one's harder to invoice. U.S. expenditures. 2 SM-6 dual-eye missiles at $4.3 million each, $8.6 million. 1 SM-2 block, IIRB, $2.1 million. 6 ASSMs at $1.8 million each, $10.8 million. 2 additional SM-2s on secondary engagements, $4.2 million. Phalanx ammunition, roughly 800 rounds of 20 millimeters, $16,000. Total U.S. expenditure, approximately $25.7 million. So the Houthis spent $4.7 million to force the United States to spend $25.7 million. By the pure economics of attrition warfare, that's actually their goal working exactly as intended. The problem is they didn't hit anything. They spent $4.7 million and got back a scratch paint job and a crew that ate breakfast and resumed patrol. The exchange rate only works if your cheap weapons actually damage something. Spending $20,000 per drone to force a $4 million response is brilliant math, right up until the $4 million response catches the drone at 600 meters and the ship sails away unimpressed. That's like buying lottery tickets to bankrupt the lottery. The math technically works until it doesn't. Beijing watched this engagement very carefully, not because of the Red Sea, because of the Taiwan Strait. Chinese naval planners have built large portions of their anti-access doctrine around the idea that saturation attacks, enough missiles, enough vectors, enough simultaneous arrivals, can overwhelm American carrier defense networks. The Carney engagement, a single destroyer operating without a carrier escort, defeating a 14-platform saturation attack without a hull penetration, is data that goes directly into those calculations. Russia watched too. Their export clients, Iran, North Korea, groups like the Houthis, have been field testing Russian-derived attack profiles against American systems for 3 years in the Red Sea and Black Sea theaters. Every intercept is a data point. What the Carney engagement showed was that the upgrade path matters. The SM-6 active seeker, the ESSM block oars agility, the integrated fire control fusion from STESPLY-1D. These are generational improvements over what the saturation math was designed to defeat. The old formulas don't close anymore. The broader lesson isn't about one ship on one night. It's about what networked systems with active terminal guidance do to saturation doctrine. When your missiles can guide themselves to terminal engagement, You can fire more simultaneously than any previous generation of fire control could manage. The bottleneck isn't the radar, it's the magazine. And the magazine has a finite count that every adversary is trying to drain. What the Carney proved is that draining it is much harder and much more expensive than the attacker's planning cell assumed. The Houthis learned that restraint is not weakness. A ship that had destroyed 38 of their drones without firing back at their launch sites wasn't incapable of escalation. It was choosing not to escalate until October 19th made the tactical case impossible to ignore. Somewhere in Sana'a, a Houthi logistics officer spent the morning of October 20th accounting for 11 drones, 1 cruise missile, and 2 ballistic missiles that would not be coming back. Someone had to write that report. Someone had to calculate what $4.7 million of inventory had purchased and explain to the Iranian suppliers why the return on investment was a scratched paint job on a ship that never slowed down. The lesson was available before the first Shahid left its launcher. You do not saturate a ship whose missiles guide themselves. You do not outpace a fire control system that tracks 200 objects simultaneously and queues engagements before the threat has completed its launch sequence. The mathematics of October 19th were decided the day the Arleigh class was designed and every upgrade that followed. The USS Carney continued her Red Sea deployment. She intercepted 11 more Houthi attacks in the following 60 days, and at no point in any of them did a single incoming round touch her hull. For the crew of 330 sailors, October 19th became a story they'd tell at retirement parties. For the U.S. Navy, it became a textbook. For the Houthis, it became a very expensive education in the difference between a doctrine that works on paper and a doctrine that works against a ship that trained for this exact scenario for 27 years. 14 for 14. One night. One destroyer. No hull penetrations. It's the naval equivalent of showing up to a snowball fight and discovering the other guy brought a snowplow. If this breakdown helped you understand what modern naval air defense actually looks like at the operational edge, share it with someone who thinks warships are just floating gun platforms with good PR. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you when the Carney's next engagement report gets declassified, which, based on recent Red Sea traffic, might be next week.